Okay. I can see people still joining, so I know that sometimes when we let you in from the waiting room, it just takes a little while for everyone to synchronise. So I'll just give it a couple more minutes to allow the people to come in and join, because they're all sort of stepping up as it goes. I think we're nearly there. Okay. Hi everybody. I can still see that people are joining, but I'm going to kick off the introduction now just to keep things moving. We're also recording this, so we will make a link available to anybody who misses part of it as well. So thanks ever so much for joining. Actually, we have got a really large number of people on this meeting. We had 185 people sign up for it, so expecting over 100 people, which is great. But what that means is we have put you on mute, and we'll probably turn your videos off as well to enable us just to control the conversation and make sure that everybody gets full benefit out of it. However, that doesn't mean that you can fall asleep, although you're very welcome to eat your lunch. I appreciate it's lunchtime. If you've been on one of the webinars that I host before, you'll know that I will try and make it interactive. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is I think it just helps us learn, but also, you know, in terms of interacting with you, it helps me to get a sense of what's going on for you, and it involves us all as a community, if you like. So there are a few polls. I've decided to do polls in this, and the reason I've done that is that I felt that having quite a large group, the data that comes out of these polls might be quite useful and of interest to you. So be prepared that there'll be a few questions. They're all anonymous, and we'll share the results with you of some of those questions that come out of this. So I'm going to move on, and my colleague Helen in the background is going to keep on admitting people from the waiting room who keep popping up. So how are we going to promote wellbeing during change and beyond? Just introducing myself if you're not aware, if this is your first time. So my background, I spent 20 odd years in corporate learning and development. I'm a psychologist. My main job at the moment is, apart from being a parent and various other things, is founder and CEO of Actus Performance Management Software. But some of you may have come across me through the HR Uprising Podcast, which it's our anniversary this week. We've done 60 episodes and we have been going for a full year. Some also might know me because you might have attended our book launch, and if you did, thank you so much, because you helped us get to best-selling status. So that's a bit about me. I love it when people follow up after a webinar and connect with me on any social media. So all of the links are there, and we will provide you with the slides afterwards as well. For some of you, if you want the recording or the slides, you're very welcome to them. Okay, so what is the purpose of this session? Sorry, I've clicked on 2 slides there. So the learning points that we want to take away from this are basically, let's look at what are the common risks to wellbeing as we start to return to the workplace. There's always been a number of issues around well-being, but perhaps now it's really come to the fore as people are conscious of the implications of having been in a lockdown situation and still having a virus out there, and the potential implications of this. So with that in mind, how can we spot mental health concerns early? And also I'm going to look at what can we do ourselves, how can we engage the line manager, and how can we work as leaders to develop a wellness culture. In terms of the content, I will try really hard to keep this to about 30 minutes, but there's quite a few statistics in here. So I'll keep moving at a pace, but I would say it would take maybe 35 or 40 minutes is a possibility. And as I say, we're recording it if anyone's only got a 30-minute deadline. So what do we mean by well-being or good mental health? I won't ask you to put in the chat, but what I will say is if you could grab the chat and make sure you know where it is, then that would be really helpful for when you want to interact with us further. And if you want to ask any questions as we go through, do feel free to do that as well. So the term mental health, I think sometimes that's the one that may sometimes appear to be almost stigmatized. So we're seeing more commonly used term well-being, but the reality is neither term should be preferable really. mental health is something that we all have, just like physical health. And depending on what we do, I guess, and how we behave, it can fluctuate. And also our natural chemistry, it may fluctuate. If we've got good mental health, we're going to be in a position where we can make the most of our potential. We're going to be resilient, so we can cope with what life throws at you, even in difficult situations like this, which are stretching. And we're in a position where we can play a full part in our relationships, in our workplace, and we have a sense of purpose. Of course, the converse is also true if somebody doesn't have great mental health, and it is something that could be triggered by the circumstances that we're in at the moment or we're going into as people return to the workplace. In terms of official terminology, people might use the word distress, and that is what they use on the Mental Health Foundation. I got some of the statistics from the Mental Health Foundation. I don't know whether that's the best word for us to use in the workplace. My sense is that I think possibly the word stress is more socially acceptable as opposed to distress. Where you're feeling stressed, someone might feel more comfortable with that. But that's the term that they're using if someone isn't coping. But the most important takeaway point is the earlier that we can recognize when something isn't right, either in ourselves or in others, the earlier we can provide support. And I think that's really, really important. I've got quite a history of mental health issues in my family, and my sister has severe anxiety and had various types of counselling, etc. And once she learned how to manage her mental health, one of the key things that I remember, she described it as walking around her depression or anxiety was like walking around a black hole. And the first 3-4 times, as she was growing up, she would actually just fall into that black hole. And once she was in it, it was very hard to get out of it. But now she's become much more adept at recognizing there is a black hole there and walking around it. And that is an analogy I've been sharing with my kids, and I'll talk later about that. I think any of us can have fluctuations where we might feel like there's a black hole. The key is spotting that black hole for ourselves and others and helping people to navigate it. But of course, mental health issues have been around for quite a long time. There is no doubt that pre-COVID, the stats were not positive. And again, this Mental Health Foundation is a great resource in terms of the link if you want to go and look at more information, and a number of these statistics I've got from here. But they were saying that mixed anxiety and depression is the most common mental disorder in Britain, with 7.8% of people being diagnosed with that. People who've got that kind of mixed anxiety and depression, it may cause 1/5 of the days lost from work in Britain. So if we're trying to make a financial case to leaders who may be unsympathetic in the organisations we work in, then actually does that mean 20% of work days could be regained if we can help people deal with anxiety and depression? And 1 adult in 6 has or has had a common mental health disorder. So it's incredibly common. Stress is another aspect of this. So stress is where we might not get diagnosed with anxiety and depression, but we might be feeling depressed. So when people say they feel like they're under stress, which could well be the circumstance we're in at the moment, 51% of adults reported feeling depressed and 61% reported feeling anxious. Remember, these are pre-COVID statistics. So this says to me that actually a huge proportion of our workforce could be feeling depressed or anxious. That would be really, really possible. Of those reporting stress, I felt this is quite high. I think in terms of some were actually self-harming, and 32% said they'd had suicidal thoughts and feelings. My view is if you get to that stage, then generally that is when you want to be talking to a GP, and people might want to have some sort of medical intervention. But 37% of people who reported feeling stressed reported feeling lonely as a result. And that is going to be compounded, isn't it, with those people who are having to self-isolate or they're away from people. So if they're already feeling under stress and they're isolated, that isolation is going to multiply. But then, and again, pre-COVID, let's hope that this is something that's going to change, almost 40% of people feared that if they said that they'd got a problem around their mental health, that it would harm their career prospects. And other ones here, I've left this one in because I thought actually this is, worries about employment is very, very current at the moment. So some people will be worried about their jobs, their finances, and all of these will affect mental health. There's lots and lots of other information about finance is one of the main drivers of people feeling in difficult positions. So if people are uncertain about their job, or they're having to take a pay cut because of they're on furlough leave, all those things will be compounding the pressures and the chances of people having that mental health issue. And the thing is, not everyone bounces back. It's that black hole. If we can avoid people falling into the black hole, then the chances are then they're going to be able to pick themselves up and recover. And that's what we really need to do. So in terms of this, I wanted to use the polls here and maybe just turn it in on ourselves. And this is an anonymous poll. All of the polls are anonymous, but we'll share the results with you afterwards, because I think we've got, we've got 100 participants on this call. So it's a representative survey. So my question to you is, if you were to choose one of those answers, and if none of them apply to you, ideally choose one. If none of them apply to you, then put something else in the chat, and decide which of these. And I think Helen will put up, I'll answer that, Corinne. I'll come back to questions in a moment there, but if anyone does know the answer of Corinne's question, that would be helpful. Helen, can you put the poll up? I can't see if you've done it or not.
I put it up for them. They're
right.
voting away now.
I can't see. Thank you, everybody. I can't see that, so that's great. So yes, and it's interesting. I'll answer myself. I would say that I have fluctuated, but I've managed to pick myself up. So I haven't ever hit it down, but I've definitely had days and weeks where I've felt a bit lower, and I've had to work hard to get out and exercise, or just consciously do something, or actually take a break. So that would be my position. So yes, there's a question while we're waiting there. Is, Corinne said, do you know what percentage of mental health issues cases have risen since COVID-19? I don't know the answer at the moment, but definitely there's a lot of concern about it. And Jolene says the research is ongoing. If you know where this research is, then we'd love to hear from you, anyone who's got that information. Are the results ready to share, Helen?
Can you see the results, Lucinda?
No, I can't.
Okay.
Very unhelpful.
So
hang on, maybe let me click. Let me see if I move away. No, I can't. So are you sharing it?
Yes, so I'm sharing it with, so everyone else can see it. It's strange that you can't, but yeah. Essentially we have 56%, so the highest percent has said that they fluctuated, but they've managed to pick themselves up.
Yeah.
And then we've got the next highest one is they've been pretty much the same, healthy during the lockdown, so that's about 29%. And then you've got 7% for both declined during lockdown and has been much the same as usual, so less healthy during lockdown. So slight decline, or okay, fine.
Mm-hmm. They've always had it. Okay, I mean, I just think this is quite interesting. Are we representative? I don't know. I'm guessing that I've got a high proportion of people professionals. We usually do on this webinar. Whether we're representative as a profession, I don't know, but that is interesting to know. So if we've fluctuated and some people have gone down, then there is absolutely, and we're possibly, you could say, a little bit more aware about how to help ourselves, and are we more aware to reach out for others? I'm not sure. So we can work out whether we're a representative group or not, but that is an interesting insight that may well reflect the likes of your audience. Now, we did do some other research when we went into, we did a spot poll in May, and this may interest you as well in terms of some of the information we found. And when we surveyed this is people professionals we surveyed, 52% believed that mental health issues would increase post-lockdown. Now, in the context of how we asked that question, we'd asked whether they thought that they had handled the crisis well, their business had handled the change well. Most HR professionals or people professionals that we surveyed, like 57% thought that they had handled it as well as they could, but due to things like the legal issues, or maybe leadership or the government instructions, it would still have been stressful and detrimental to people's mental health. So that's what we believe, but we don't know how much by. And a quarter of people felt that attrition or absenteeism might increase. And remember, most of us are working for businesses that will have been affected by this, and we need to bounce back in terms of our productivity. So we need to find a way to help people to be present, not presenteeism, but present and performing in order to help our businesses grow post lockdown, don't we? So again, it is something that needs to be taken really seriously. I think that's my key take from this. The other things I asked people, and it was a choice here of what other concerns, and this was back in May, so I think this would move on. But at the time, it was just when the sort of reduction in lockdown had come over, and people were able to give more than one answer. So 62% of people were worrying about when it was right to return to the workplace itself, actually into the office. Half of them were worried about treating employees fairly. And I think that is incredibly tricky at the moment. How is it fair? Is it fair to treat everyone the same? Or if they've got childcare, shielding issues, it's so complicated as to how to do things. At the time, 43% were, it was just when the new regulations come out, were feeling that the concerns were about lack of clarity, potentially down to how furlough was implied and put in place in the first place. I wonder whether that's improved now. Almost a fifth of people were worried about their business long-term viability, and others, and we've got about people not having plans in place. I'm interested, if any of you want to put in the chat, are there any other concerns that you think have come to light for you right now that you think people in people professional roles or individuals are particularly concerned about? I'd be interested to see what you might see. Oh yes, so bias, discrimination, it is quite a risk for that. Veronica said that potentially unconscious bias could increase, absolutely. I think there is a whole piece there. I talked to a few people about diversity and inclusion, and actually there can be some real issues with that. So I'll let you put any more chats up if you like, but while I do that, I'm going to put up some suggestions or ideas that I had that I think people may be concerned about. I've got, yeah, resentment when the team reintegrates, people having to work and do childcare, unable to answer employee questions, COVID risk. Exactly, yes, I agree, Victoria. I think the whole coming back from furlough is tricky. Volume of work, it's hard to judge, isn't it, what the right amount of work is to do, says Sarah. Claire says people don't want to go back into the workplace, they want remote working to continue. So if they're forced to go into an office, isn't necessarily going to work, but then equally, are we going to be disconnected? So John, when we're working from home. Yes, do we want to even return to normality? Well, the whole anxiety, or commutes, says Lucy Barkley-Carr and Nicola, yeah, do you want to do that? Because actually there is evidence to say that people are happier working remotely. They're happier working from home or having this better work-life balance. So there's definitely something where people want to be able to do more of that on the whole, but there are some people who still need that contact. So it's how do you get that balance? Yeah, so that's the tricky thing that we need to do. So those might be concerns that people have got, absolutely, in terms, and those are also concerns for us. Yes, and I think probably, and Marie says a blended approach would probably work for most, exactly. So it's how do we do that? And if we're going to have a blended approach, then we need to make sure that our line managers have the skills to do that and our workplaces and technology can support it. Now, I have suggested some other concerns that might be affecting people in your workplace, just as in typical concerns. And I'll put that up on my slide and it will come up in a poll that I cleverly can't see, but you can. So I've got 7 options that I came up with that I thought might be concerns. And if you think I've missed something out that's pressing, by all means do that. And you can select more than one. So if you think for your workforce, let's maybe say choose your top 3. What do you think the top 3, or choose up to 3, might be concerning your workforce at the moment? And the reason I thought this is useful, it's useful for us to think about what are their actual concerns, because then we can maybe think about how we can communicate to overcome those concerns and give people some support and clarity. Helen, can you tell me when the poll has?
Yes, so I have launched the polling. So about 75 out of 96 have voted so far.
Okay.
I'll just give them maybe another 30 seconds, and then I'll end it and let you know what the results are.
Great. And while you do that, I'll share a few more chats as well. So, I mean, Lucy's saying that you're talking about how you're maintaining the business over the last few months, and now this is a phase for recovery and growth. I completely agree, Lucy. So after I've done this webinar, I'm going on to our team all brief, and it's about, this is time to bounce back. This is about what we do next. But of course, the thing we've got to bear in mind is a lot of us have been working all the way through, including the team that my team you can hear on the phone, who've been working really hard. So there are lots of people who are pretty drained and exhausted for working all the way through, and then you've also got the people who've been furloughed who are going to have some anxiety about their challenges and reintroduction. How interesting. Yeah, so there's no new vision. Emma saying good concern is in public sector, local government. There's something about going back to normal, but they're not necessarily using this as an opportunity to reinvent, which is a shame, isn't it? Because it's an opportunity. Lots of concerns about when and how people will work back in the office and can they continue to work from home. So that's really interesting. So these are things that you're saying. Helen, do you want to, if you can, yeah, you put the results up, you tell me, just tell me the top 3 or something, and then I'll look at them later. If the audience, can the audience see them?
Yes, so I've shared the results with everyone. Essentially, we have number 1 being the most concern being the safety of the workplace. I suppose that's not really that surprising. And then I'd say the next 2 are actually neck and neck. 53% voted for childcare and job security would be the next. So those are the sort of top 3. But safety of the commute is quite high as well. That's about 45%. And then
probably depends where you're based, isn't it? So most of those are relevant then, so 45%, and that's your 4th one down. And there are others that we're seeing as we go through the comments. I know you can all see the comments yourself, so I'll let you read through them as well in order to keep things going. But thanks, do keep the comments going. I think it's really useful for people to share with each other and to be able to see that comment and feedback. To know you're not alone, right? That's the thing, that we're all sharing these challenges. I got 11 evidence-based wellbeing tips. I think most of them you'll have come across before, and they are pretty common sense. 10 of them I got from the Work Foundation. On the whole, and I added number 11 on, and again, I'll come back to that in a moment as to why I added it on. So undoubtedly, exercise, getting people to be active, though it's about endorphins. I know that personally, it helps me significantly if I've had some fresh air, I've got outside, and I'm moving. And so I think that's a real key mood impact on your mood. Nutrition. In principle, we are at home, and now all the deliveries are sorted out. We should be able to eat reasonably well. And we should be able to keep ourselves hydrated because we get access to things. However, we can forget and get stuck to our desks. So how do we do that, and how do we encourage people to do more of that? Of course, the other downside is we can also end up drinking too much tea or coffee or whatever our stimulants might be. So those will take us down in terms of depressants. Quality sleep. I was listening to something apparently on Radio 4 this morning saying about lockdown dreams. So people have maybe been sleeping longer, but not necessarily as high quality. And that would probably correlate with people being anxious. But how can we have quality sleep? So it might be exercise in the morning, not in the evening, all the sort of elements around sleep hygiene. We can't be productive when we're tired. And akin to that, it's not just sleep. Are we taking real breaks? I did a spot poll of my team on Monday and asked, what works for them? And a number of them are saying it's not just the exercise, it's taking a break, it's changing the scene, it's going to a different walk on a different field, just something that's a change. And actually, I took half term off last week and we did DIY. I hate DIY, but I've got to say it was brilliant in that, we've achieved some stuff in the house, but I actually felt like I'd had a proper break. So although you are at home, it is hanging over you the whole time. So making sure that we are taking some breaks. Social contact was another recharging aspect for the team, for my team. And if you're zoomed out, it might be going for a socially distanced walk with a friend, but having that social contact with people, particularly if you're just living with one other person or on your own. In terms of well-being, make sure you're doing things that you're good at and enjoy, which we can't always control in terms of our work, but try and have some stuff that you enjoy doing, or if you've got certain skills, cooking or baking, I'm seeing lots of that going on, do those things that make you feel good. It's all about kindness in terms of mental health, not putting yourself down and recognizing you're doing things well, doing the best that you can. We need to encourage people to talk about how they feel, and that's those around us, and we need to be prepared to talk about how we feel and to ask for help, not see it as a sign for weakness. And number 11, which I don't know if there's evidence overtly for it, but I do think reduce social media. And this, again, it comes from the fact that I've got a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they've gone down a little bit late. They've done well overall, and I think they would indicate the fluctuating. And we'll go for a walk and we'll talk about it. And I think one of the things with there's some very disturbing stuff out there at the moment on social media, and it can be really addictive, and it can definitely promote anxiety. So if that is the case for you, or you see with other people, try and reduce that, or try and focus on positive stuff. One of the members of the team loves the gardening channel. So she doesn't look at social media, she just sets a lovely gardening channel, and it's all lovely and serene. Yes. So sorry, I just quickly looked at the chat, but I won't pick up on that. I will keep flowing through. Okay, so those are just common sense wellbeing tips. Can you encourage to do yourself, or can you encourage others to do more of that and make people aware of it? Now, another question for you. Which of the following might be warning signs for somebody having a drop in their well-being or starting to be stressed? What do you think would you see? Lack of contact with others, so they're isolating themselves, people procrastinating, so putting things off, or conversely, a chaotic approach. They might say they're drained or tired, long or unusual hours, not being productive or doing too much, poor timekeeping, lack of or over enthusiasm for something, lack of or no social interaction on internal forums. So I personally think that any of the above might do it, but a number of people will, you might have different ones. I'm going to ask you what your other one is, and let's see what other people are saying here. So Corinne's saying complaining of being drained, had a lot of people burning out over the last few weeks. Yes, so being drained is quite a good sign of some people feeling stressed and needing a break. And I had a conversation that with a member of my team last week, and actually this is where, as managers, we've got to make it okay for people to work slightly different hours. If they need to take a break, they need to take a break, and really encouraging people to do that, to do and recharge. So we've got SMT burnout. Oh gosh, that's tricky, Joe. No interaction, so people stop interacting. And of course, the key there, John, is that it's about people being it's about doing something that's different from normal. So if you have people who are naturally very quiet anyway, it's about a change. But if they don't interact at all and they're not feeding back, then that's tricky. Headache. Oh, that's a good one, Jolene. I didn't mention that. Yes, complaints of headaches, other aches and pains could be symptomatic of things, of other strains, actually, or backache or others. Now, it could be an indication of a poor setup or not drinking enough water, but it could absolutely be a sign of stress. So they might be complaining of something physical, which is safe to say. Gosh, some of you got some really tough things going on. What I will do is I'll open it up at the end if anyone wants to talk further, but I'll keep going because of the timekeeping. So yeah, I can see that there's some really tough times going on for people, and do you know what? Be kind to yourselves and recognize what you are doing well. You're doing a great job. You are investing in yourselves, thinking about what you can do about your own well-being, because there is this whole thing about us not putting our own oxygen mask on first. And actually, I noticed I did a review of our HR Uprising podcasts recently, the most popular ones. And one of the ones that wasn't so popular, I thought was interesting, was all about self-care. So I wonder whether we're a bit guilty of not doing enough of it ourselves. So in terms of the warning signs, any of those and some of the extra ones that people have said are signs of a drop in well-being potentially. The thing with this sort of thing is essentially it's any change from the norm. Now, that is, of course, we need to know what the norm is for our people. And if we haven't worked virtually with them, we might not know what that is. So I really think that line manager skills and talents are going to be the key to develop going forwards. The skill and our ability to pick up on things and understand how people's requirements virtually and give clarity virtually and support people. We need to know what normality is for the person we're working with and recognize when they move from it to be able to pick up on it. So one more question for you, and again, you can choose more than one, but I thought this would be interesting again if you think, well, how do you demonstrate stress? What would be an indication of when you're demonstrating stress? And I've just come up with 5 there, so not all of them. By all means, put in the chat if I've missed your stress tell. The interesting thing for me is I go into ridiculous amounts of detail sometimes on things, whereas I'm naturally more big picture. So it's just working, it's doing something out of character is one of my stresses. So is the poll live, Helen?
Yes. I've already had about over 65% vote, so I'll give them another 30 seconds.
Brilliant.
And then I'll share.
Yeah, Anna gets tired. I do as well, and not being able to sleep properly. That's okay. Good to hear that your business is shipping out office equipment. I think chairs and monitors is absolutely vital for people to be able to get rid of the physical reasons for physical pains, aches and pains. Lack of human communication, says Chica. Well, Tracy, why don't you have a lie down for 20 minutes? If that recharges you, or go for a walk for 20 minutes, that's the whole thing, isn't it? Actually, that might be the best possible thing to be productive. And it's actually giving ourselves permission to do what we need. Because if you lie down for 20 minutes, you can then get more done in that remaining 40 minutes than if you'd sat at your desk for an hour. And that's the key, where we've got to get away from this sort of presenteeism mentality that many of us have been in cultures that go with that. Definitely need to switch off. Okay, what have we got then, Helen?
So the highest one at 71% is being irritable or emotional.
Yeah.
And then the next one is withdrawing from others. And the third highest is lack of productivity or focus at 42%. They've all and then working very long hours and making silly mistakes are sort of similar as well. They're about 30%.
Yeah.
Some people have specified something else and they've put those in the chat.
Yes, and I suppose that's the point. So those ones I chose there, I've put as ones that I thought you might see more visually, more of, in others, if that makes sense. Loads of you have said about restlessness and lack of sleep and tiredness. So I guess that is something, if you're on a chat with people and they go, oh, I'm tired, I didn't sleep very well, that is clearly an obvious warning sign from everybody's saying here. So that's key. And if there's any others, Helen, if you just run through the chat, we can pick up. So I felt that was helpful to ask, because those signs are things that we might see, and we might want to encourage our line managers to look out for those signs and recognize it's not just they didn't sleep well because the kids woke them up, they didn't sleep well maybe because they're stressed, which may mean that they're at risk of their well-being dropping off. So what do we need our line managers to do to encourage well-being? Because actually, people professionals on here, if you're in that position, you can only do so much. You've got to encourage the culture to be around well-being. So I think line managers, they need to be available, although obviously they also need to be able to switch off in order to look after their own well-being. Ideally, they need to be open and be prepared to share personal struggles or challenges. That's a sign of strength. If they admit that they've been feeling anxious or haven't slept well or have had their own problems, it's all about humility and authenticity. And then people are going to feel much safer to share those with others. They need to ask how people feel. And most importantly, listen to the answer. Don't be like my old boss who used to do a one-to-one and then just as I got my hand on the door, say, oh, and how are you? So we need to find out how people feel probably at the start of a conversation and listen to the answer. And if they need to talk, be prepared to give it that bit of time. The next element is about trust. We need to trust people to deliver against clear, agreed goals. It's about being output related. And we also need to be realistic about expectations and timescales, because we won't necessarily know what other challenges that person is working on, or how long things are taking, or how productive that they are being. Apparently, recognition drops off. Even if we weren't great at recognition before, we get even less good at it in a virtual environment. So remembering to recognize people and say thank you to people would be really helpful to people to encourage their well-being and give people a sense of purpose that they're achieving. If people aren't performing, that doesn't mean allow underperformance. Usually underperformance is down to a lack of clarity of clear goals. So perceived underperformance, then, and again, I know that is an issue for people because it's our #1 downloaded HR Uprising podcast at the moment. So what we need to say, okay, if someone didn't achieve a goal, we need to find out why, or what was the cause. Did they not buy into it? Could they not do it? Did they not understand? Did you not agree timescales? So having an open mind, but keeping that focus on performance in a supportive way. We need to avoid encouraging presenteeism. It should be fine to go for that 20-minute lie down, dog walk, whatever in the middle of the day. I heard a horror story about somebody now who's having to ask people to complete timesheets as to what hours they worked and productivity at the end of the day. Well, aside from that being a really bad use of time, I'd say, I think that's really tough in terms of a trust. For virtual working to work, we have to empower people and motivate people to want to be productive. And it isn't, you can't breathe down their neck and micromanage them into productivity. So with that in mind, we need to encourage people to set and own their own outputs and timescales. It's about empowerment, and it's really important to lead by example and give people permission to stop and take a break if they need. So those would be my 10 tips, and I'm sure there's others that we need to do that I would encourage people to take on, in terms of encourage line managers to take on if possible. And then my sort of final content slide, I hope I've not gone too far past it, is how can we promote it as leaders of our culture? So these are sort of things where you can try and have a ripple effect in your organisation. So you can ask your senior management team to be open about their own mental health, to share their own challenges. Wherever possible, where there's anxiety, provide certainty about change as much as possible. For example, if you are planning to bring people back from furlough in July part-time, tell them as soon as possible. I know in theory that you can ask them to come back to work tomorrow, but that's going to promote anxiety. So try and tell people, give them certainty about what you are planning or what you're not planning, or in the absence of clarity, tell them, you will give more information in X date. So certainty helps people with anxiety. And if you said that your number one fear for many people is coming back to the workplace, then provide certainty. We're not going to ask you to come back full-time before September, or we are going to ask you, but we're going to put in perspex screens around the desks. What certainty can you communicate to people to reduce their anxiety? Consider listening mechanisms if you haven't got them already. So things like wellbeing pulse surveys, so you can get the calibrate really the sense of how people are feeling as time goes on. Encourage all managers to have like a rolling agenda item, which is how do we feel? Again, I would say you do that at the start of a meeting, not at the end of the meeting. So how do we feel, and have something where we're actually prepared to share and open up. Be prepared to model good behaviours. So, show that you're prepared to go and walk the dog in the middle of the day, or you are taking some time off to go and bake bread with your kids. So model those kind of behaviours if it's about work-life balance. Try to create a culture which is output driven rather than hours driven. And that, if you do that, then sometimes people will work more hours in order to achieve the output, and sometimes they can take time back. And that is what most of us want to be able to do, be treated like adults in that situation. So if we can create that culture, then that is ideal. Wellbeing incentives. Can you create some competition or fun about wellbeing activities? So get people to count their steps, or a healthy eating challenge or recipe of the week. Is there something where you can create some competition or fun around some wellbeing activities that might encourage that? There are going to be people nonetheless who need help. Obviously they've got their GPs in principle, but is there a safe escalation route? If the line manager isn't doing a great job, do they have someone they can come to? It might be you might have mental health first aiders, there may be other people you can train up inside that people can talk to. And really, I'd say educate your line managers, because they are going to be the key to having a culture of well-being. Can't just go back to how things were. So those were the things that I thought that we could focus on, which would be constructive. And so just as we wrap up, curious as to what you might do, any of the things that you might do, feel free to enter in the chat. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll keep an eye on the chat and see what people do, and I'll also look back on the previous chat to share with you. And while we do that, you let me know what you might do to improve wellbeing in your organisation or for yourself. What might you take away from this webinar? And I've got some other webinars, the other webinars coming up this month are up there with the links. So we're going to go mindful employer. Lucy, it says there's a great low cost link. I don't know if we can share the chat, but we'll do, we'll check whether we can do that because it's got names on it. But if there's any key links or anything, we will share that. So Julia keeps her timesheet for her own use, for her to work out when she plans to work. Yes, you will get slides. We'll provide you with the slides, don't worry. Oh, yeah. Okay, it's very, very hard juggling. 7, 9 years old, I'm quite sure. And also doing it for so long, it's quite exhausting, isn't it? Get people to bring their own solutions to problems rather than having to do it yourself. We're saying, I love it. There's some support going on to each other there, so brilliant. You're supporting each other as ever. Mindful employer sounds like a great low-cost resource for independent confidential service for employees. Lucy, if you have the link or the web page for that, we'll put it on the email that goes out to people. Definitely training for line managers. It can be virtual training for line managers. Ooh, that's a nice idea. A telephone tree, says Claire Bryce, so that people contact others to see who they are, how they are. So everyone kind of has a little, almost like a buddy system. That's nice, isn't it? It's like the old snow line back in the day we used to have, but for things. Great. Let's have a look. Wellbeing challenge around steps, offer couch to care 5K, healthy recipe challenge, says Patrina. Great stuff. I like the telephone tree idea, Alison. That's a great one. Right, so my slides appear to have disappeared off the page, which is quite strange. Thank you for sharing that, Lucy. So, sorry, my computer went okay because you've pretty much seen my last slide anyway. Do get in touch if you want to. I appreciate my slides I must have turned it off by accident. Here's my contact details. We'll send the slides out to you because we know who came on there. So we obviously have your email address. If anyone's got any questions or wants to talk to me separately, please feel free to stay on the group. But I will wrap up the webinar there and hope that you took some takeaways that would be of help or use to you there. Thank you very much for attending.